Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
The best Breeders' Cup seminar on the internet. Crush racing's biggest days with expert insights from the Pick Six King himself, Jon Stettin. Register now for the Past the Wire Breeders' Cup seminar presented by Amwager. Thursday, November 3rd at 6:30. Visit PastTheWire.com and reserve your seat today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Past the Wire TV with Jon Stettin, Jim Gazzale. We used to call Jim a sub. Now we call him a co-host because he's on quite regularly. And he is our expert videographer. If you see the incredible improvement in the videography and graphics of Past the Wire TV and Past the Wire in general, Jim is the man that you can thank for all of that. And it turns out he can write and knows a little bit about horse racing as well. So he's been a big asset to Past the Wire, and we appreciate it. Mr. Wilson is tied up. He's going to try and get a show in. We're going to try and get a show in either later today or tomorrow, depending on his schedule. But he's tied up with the Fasig sale. I think starts tomorrow, and he's out there scouting for winners. So takes a lot of time to do that properly. So we give him a pass for this morning's show. But we wanted to stay on course. We're definitely in the final countdown for the Breeders' Cup now. And I think there are a couple of things that are worth talking about. One of which is the venue, Keeneland. Okay, in my opinion, of most of the Breeders' Cup locations, if not all, Keeneland is the one that the post position draw means as much as any other track, especially at certain distances. And I'm one who usually downplays the significance of the draw. I look at it, I factor it. In certain races, I lean to certain things. Sprints, I tend to sometimes avoid the inside because they can get bottled up unless they're going right to the lead. But at Keeneland, especially in a couple of the races we'll talk about, I think draw is extremely important. Any thoughts?
Yeah, typically, I personally don't really pay attention to post position outside of like the Kentucky Derby. But I think you make a good point, right? Where you've got 12 viable contenders in a race, all kind of searching for their most optimal spot, which is going to be similar to the horses on the inside of them and the outside of them. It can create a little bit of chaos. So I think for the Breeders' Cup, like you said, especially at Keeneland, where I think we'll probably see a speed favoring track like we did a couple of years ago when it was there. I think it certainly comes into play, and it's something that we need to really pay attention to over the next week and a half once it's all finalized.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I'll tell you this: I'm in disagreement with you on the fact that it was or on the opinion that it was speed favoring a couple of years ago. It was a very fast track, but if you looked at the charts on Friday and Saturday, horses won from everywhere. I mean, this off the top of my head, Essential Quality won the Juvenile from well off the pace. When a track is really speed favoring, that doesn't happen. I thought it was a very fast track, extremely fast, but I thought it was an honest track. I thought if you were the best horse, you can win. And I'm hoping to see that, but that's going to bring us to another segment of the show that we'll talk about in a minute. But why I think the draw is so important at Keeneland in races like the mile. Okay, if they were running the mile at Belmont, even at Aqueduct, it's a one-turn mile. Keeneland, it's 2 turns. So if you're drawn on the outside, turf as well, okay? And not only the turf mile, but the juvenile turf races that are at a mile and a 16th, you've got an extremely short run into that first turn, okay? It's very easy to get hung out wide through no fault of the rider. And when you get hung out wide into that first turn at Keeneland, it becomes very difficult to win. You've really got to be the best horse. So, I would say Keeneland, as much as, if not more than any other track, when I handicap and look at the mile and the 16th and mile turf races, the mile dirt races going 2 turns, post and how the pace sets up is going to play a significant factor for me. A horse that's going to clear, maybe it's not that important. A horse that's going to drop way back and come from last or come from far back and be able to save ground might not be as important. But if you're a stalker, middle of the pack type runner, I think in my opinion, it creates a disadvantage. And it's tough to give anything away in Breeders' Cup like races. There are just so many good horses and so many contenders that, if you're the best by half a length, but you lose a length or 2 around a turn because you're wide, that could be the difference between, getting the trophy and getting the nice try award. So
yeah,
I think that's an important factor, and I think that speaks to a bad habit that a lot of people seem to do in big races, and that's kind of lock into opinions early, okay,
yeah.
and this far out. I like this horse, or I like that horse, or how they going to beat this horse in that race, or how they going to beat that horse in this race. We could even talk Flightline. Every time I mention Flightline, I get flack for saying I'm knocking him, and I'm not. I'm as impressed as anybody else with him. I'm just not willing to give him the classic trophy until he actually does it on a racetrack. And now, with maybe 2.5 inches of rain possible on Saturday, you throw another intangible question mark into the mix on Flightline. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point, kind of clarifying the nuance between the phrase speed favoring and a fast track. Two different things, which I think is important to highlight what you did, which is good and helpful. The weather, yeah, certainly going to be a big factor. I was kind of laughing. I saw some conversations on Twitter middle of last week asking if somebody has seen the forecast for Breeders' Cup Friday and Saturday. And I was like, oh my God, we're like, 2+ weeks out. Why are we already talking about it? But yeah, I think for as much work as people are putting in to handicapping these races, and while we try not to have our opinions set in stone this far out, pre-draw and all of that, It would be a real shame to kind of handicap for a beautiful, sunny, fast and firm, and then, walk in there on Friday morning and, it's pouring rain, or walk in there on Saturday morning and it's pouring rain. And, what do you do then? You gotta start all over.
You really do, and you're up against the 8 ball, because a lot of times tracks that are very sloppy early in the morning or are getting rain on and off all day change throughout the day. Okay. And we talked a little bit about bias, and I've written a lot of articles and done shows and talked a lot about what I call false biases, and you see it all the time. And let's bring up the Keeneland Breeders' Cup a few years ago. Okay. 1, 2, 3 races into the card, where commentators on TV who were supposed to be experts are saying, "Oh, it's obvious you got to be on a lead to win. Obvious you got to be on a lead to win. Oh, the track is really favoring speed." And I was like, this is ridiculous. That's not true at all. Yes, they did have some early wire to wire winners, but those horses were only speed, or the other speed didn't get out, or they were 6-5 and they were supposed to win anyway. And it was far too early to call it a speed biased racetrack. And the end of the day came, and there were winners from off the pace. And like I said, Essential Quality just comes to mind. And how I tell a true speed bias from what I call a false speed bias, which in that case was just a very fast track, is this. Okay. If the track is a true speed bias, 1, you will not see any horses win from far off the pace. And 2, you will see horses win or go wire to wire or hang tough that normally under normal circumstances would not have. Okay. So you really don't know if, and that'll hold through the whole card. So you really don't know how much of a speed bias it truly is until you've watched several races and you've seen examples of that. Essential Quality is up the track, and some 25-1 shot wins that race that really on a fast track had no shot to wire those horses. Then you start looking at a true speed bias that you can probably capitalize on or make some money on. And when you find one, it's great, but you don't find them as often as you think.
Yeah, that brings up a good point, right? It's like you almost find it halfway through the day.
Right.
And what if, so let's say Friday, you're thinking by, mid to late card on Friday, you're thinking there might be a little bit of a bias, whether it's a speed bias, an inside bias, an outside bias. Do you allow that then to kind of carry over to the next day in your handicapping, knowing full well that they're going to be doing, maintenance and more maintenance and even more maintenance across the track for several hours leading into Saturday's card? Where do you kind of draw the line between, okay, I noticed this on Friday, do I allow it to influence my picks and my tickets on Saturday?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I told somebody I would address this, because I mentioned it on the last show, and a guy who watches, a nice gentleman, Stephen Testa, I believe is his name, watches Past the Wire TV, and he asked me to explain, and it goes back to Sunday Silence and Easy Goer. And we were talking on the last show about how, even though I was an East Coast guy, I would be the first guy to say, in my opinion, as much as I loved Easy Goer and as great as I thought he was, Sunday Silence was the better horse and beat him 3 out of 4 times. And the time that Easy Goer did beat Sunday Silence was in the Belmont Stakes on his home track. But there's a flip, there's an underlying story to that nobody talks about today, and most people don't even remember, and half the people of today probably aren't even aware of it. People get involved in that argument and probably aren't even aware of it. The night before the Belmont that year, okay, Easy Goer was owned by Ogden Phipps. Okay, everybody knows that. The probably one of the most famous silks in racing, the black with the cherry cap, one of my personal favorites. And you know, the Phipps breed the most expensive horses that money can't buy. I mean, they're just priceless, you know. And Easy Goer was a special horse to them and immensely talented. And you know, Sunday Silence got the better of him in the Derby, got the better of him with a lot of help from Pat Valenzuela in the Preakness. And here we have what was thought to be their showdown in the Belmont Stakes. Well, Easy Goer didn't like a wet track and the mud, and it rained a ton that Friday and that Friday night, and the track was soaked, and it was going to be muddy, okay, and a drying out muddy track. And Easy Goer didn't like that at all. And what Ogden Phipps, so the story goes, had done was he had the Naira grounds crew head over to Belmont at about 2 o'clock in the morning, okay, and start working on the track about 3 hours before they normally would. And they closed the track for training that morning for a long period of time while they continued to work the track and dry the track and rake the track and harrow the track and do everything that they possibly could, okay? All hands on deck, overtime allowed. Let's get this track fast for the Belmont Stakes. And they did, and Easy Goer won. I don't think Sunday Silence fired his best shot that day as well, which sometimes happens after those, you know, first two hard Triple Crown races. We've seen it happen before. But that's the backstory to that nobody knows about. Now, is it true that, you know, Mr. Phipps had that done because he knew that? I can't say that I know that for sure, but I know enough people around the racetrack who were there that say, indeed, the grounds crew did show up at 2 a.m. They were there all night long into the morning. They closed the track. They didn't allow the people train. They worked it. They had more tractors and harrows than you had ever seen going in every which direction that you could imagine on that racetrack for that day to get it fast. So at whose request that would be, other than Mr. Phipps, who was the head of the board of trustees at the time, I believe. I don't know who would have had that kind of clout, to have that done. But that was the backstory of the one time that Easy Goer did beat Sunday Silence. And Mr. Testa, that was the story that I was alluding to, that a lot of people don't know. Us older guys remember some of that stuff that a lot of younger guys don't know about. And that was the backstory to that. So, you know, I think the track, you know, Bob Baffert once said to me in an interview, I was asking him about, you know, the tracks and shipping in and whatnot. And he was like, you know, he goes, I don't really worry about that as much as a lot of other people do, because good quality horses run on anything, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You bring them anywhere, you bring them in, and you know, a good horse will show up. And I guess he's had enough and been around enough good ones to know that. So it makes me think it may not be as important as we think, but from more of a gambling perspective, when you're looking for every edge that you can get, I think it's important to properly assess whether there is a bias or whether there's a false bias. And on Keeneland, you know, on days like that, I remember the Breeders' Cup Juvenile a couple of years ago. It was won by a Ralph Nix horse that Mike Smith rode, and I apologize for not being able to remember the horse's name, okay? It was in California, might have been at Del Mar, but it was a Ralph Nix horse Mike Smith rode. I believe it was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. She never really did much after that. But on our Breeders' Cup seminar.
Is it Caledonia Road?
That was it, Caledonia Road, okay. That particular year, okay, I had said I thought she was a contender. I thought she had a shot. She wasn't near my top choice, but I recognized the closer's bias. I recognized the way the pace was going. I recognized how things were happening over the course of that particular Breeders' Cup, and I adjusted and wound up betting her to win. Okay, just because I saw a real bias and I saw a situation I could take advantage of a bias where a horse that might not be the best horse might have the advantage that day, and she won. And, you know, you can make adjustments, but again, it's got to be a true bias, and you will watch it again at Keeneland because the track is probably going to be super fast, especially if it doesn't rain. Probably going to get some early wire-to-wire winners. And I wish we can bet on this instead of betting on a Breeders' Cup race. I'd want to bet that at least 2 or 3 people on air say, oh, you got to be on a lead to win by the time the third race is run. Because if I could bet on that, I'd bet my whole Breeders' Rank bankroll on that, whether or not it's true, because they will say that as long as you get 1 or 2 wire-to-wire winners, they'll say, oh, you need to be on the lead to win. And it's very misleading. You know, it's just a misleading statement. You know, it may turn out to be true this year, but more often than not, it isn't. So bias is something that has to really be looked at long and hard before you think it's something you can capitalize on, at least in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, you know, it's something that I feel like is not always blatantly obvious. And with, you know, I just feel like sometimes people are too quick to say there's a bias. You know, you're like
Absolutely.
2 races, 3 races into a day, and you know, you've got 3 wire-to-wire winners. It's like, got to be in front to win. But if you think about it, most of these Breeders' Cup contenders, at least on the dirt, where are they normally when they, for the horses that win? They're usually within a handful of lengths of the lead throughout the race, somewhere between like 1st and 5th, most times. So to your point, you know, it's hard to decipher. And I think a lot of people are kind of quick to assign a bias when it might just be the track is playing fair, and this is the quality of, you know, the top horses in the world going head to head and running their race and winning races.
No question about it, Jim. And you know, a lot of times I'll see a card where, okay, first horse wins wire to wire, he was 3 to 5. Second horse wins wire to wire, he was 1 of 2 speeds, the other speed didn't break. Third horse wins wire to wire, he was lone speed. And there you have somebody on TV saying, oh, you got to be on the lead to win.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
you have a crystal ball. How do you know that? You know, those first 3 races didn't tell you that. You may think they did, but in reality, they didn't. Another interesting angle, monkey wrench, for lack of a better term, gets thrown into the mix with the Euros. Okay, I've been a big fan of European racing and European horses shipping to the United States and winning for 30 years. Okay. Before it was fashionable. Okay. Today it's fashionable. I'll go back. I'll throw names at you that you never heard of. Probably half the people watch the show never heard of a guy named Adrian Maxwell. This guy used to ship in from England and win at big prices. Like, forget about it. Okay. Made scores on him back. I don't even remember how old I was. But, you know, now you have a situation where everybody's on to the Euros and they tend to dominate. Okay. But what are those guys, okay, and they've already announced who they're bringing over, most of them anyway. What do they look for when they bring their horses over here? They look for horses that are running over there on softer turf with some give in it, that they think like firmer turf better, so they're going to come over here to the United States, okay? Now all of a sudden they get rain. So now they're bringing horses that they wanted to run on firm turf over here on turf with giving it, that they were trying to avoid or get away from in that Group 1 or Grade 1, you know, caliber of race. And I think it creates an interesting dynamic. Now, here's the flip side to it. I still think that even though it kind of works against their game plan, they still get an advantage. And I'll tell you why. Maybe they are better, or they're horses that they want to run on firmer ground because they prefer that, but they're still used to running and training on that wet, deep, heavy ground. And when they come here, they're going to face a bunch of horses that are not used to that. Okay. We take the races off the grass. the snap of a hat. All right.
Yeah.
Not going to take them off for the Breeders' Cup. At least I certainly hope not. So I still think, even though things didn't go to plan and we're now, playing the hand we're dealt, if you're a European guy that brought a horse here to get firm ground and you got rain, I still think they wind up with an advantage because they train and run on those kind of surfaces anyway, and our horses don't. Any thoughts from your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think now that we've seen the European turf horses do quite well over here in the Breeders' Cup, I think people just by default give them, a couple of extra check marks as they're preparing their tickets and their wagers. But isn't Aidan O'Brien like 0 for his last like 20 something in the Breeders' Cup? So
I think on dirt, I think Order of Australia won at Keeneland.
oh, right. Yeah. So I just think it's worth
and destroyed me in the process, mind you. I think that was one of those races where, like in the pick 5, and this happens, it's horse racing, where there were like 14 horses in the race. I think I had like 11 of them.
yeah.
And Order of Australia wasn't one of them because I'm stubborn and I just don't go all. I'll always find 1 or 2 or 3 that I think are not going to win. And he was one of the ones that was not on my ticket, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
that's why it comes right to mind. And he's coming back. He'll be running in the mile.
Yeah, I think the Europeans definitely warrant a little bit more credit, certainly for the fact that they at least train over this type of ground. Will they like it over here? I think that remains to be seen. And I guess my overall point is I don't know that they're just a cinch in these spots, especially because, like you said, I agree. Most of them are coming over here hoping to find that firm footing, and it's not looking like that's going to be the case. So there's some decent turf horses in the U.S. that I think will fare quite well against the European imports this year.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'll share something, and out of respect to riders, I don't think it's important that I say who it is, but a couple of years ago, the Breeders' Cup was at Churchill Downs, and I happened to stay that year at I think it's called the Galt Hotel, whatever the heck it is, but it was a really nice hotel in Louisville, and it's where all the European horsemen were staying. Like, I was down the hall from Michael Stout and Frankie Dettori and Ryan Moore and Aidan O'Brien. They were all on my floor, all that. So, we were there the whole week, and I got friendly with a lot of them, took a lot of pictures, had a lot of fun, got to know. And there was one particular, and they were hanging around the hotel bars every night and whatnot. And, I would see them in the morning in the gym, the riders. And I had one very interesting conversation with one of the top European riders in the world, rides in England and Ireland, all over for top barns, and a very, very, what I would call, physically talented, but a very cerebral rider. Okay, very, very thin. And we talked about that very thing, about the European horses that come here because they want firmer turf, and if they don't get it, what happens. And that's kind of, that conversation put that light bulb on in my head about, they still have an advantage. But he even felt, and the reason I'm not going to say who it is because I just don't want to disparage any other riders or anybody, or call a guy out like that, because it's just not my style. It was a one-on-one conversation, but I don't think he'd have a problem with me saying what he said without saying who he is. But what he said is that when they ride in very, very wet conditions and a course is very, very slippery, they're used to that over there. Okay. And they're used to how horses feel and respond when they're slipping and not getting over the ground well. And they're more inclined to recognize a horse that's just struggling but going okay, as opposed to a horse that might slip and have a mishap, because they're just so much more exposed to that. And they said a lot of times on a wet course, he felt that even on a lesser horse, he had an advantage over an American rider on a possibly better horse in a very wet condition, because he just knew the condition and knew his horse was struggling but not in trouble, where the other rider might be a little bit more hesitant to really ask his horse when he wanted to, because he's just not quite sure how the horse is going, or whether the horse is in danger of slipping or taking a bad step or something like that. And he thought that all those years of experience of riding in those conditions was actually also an edge, for European riders. And again, I don't think it's important to say who it was, but he's definitely a rider you would pay attention to, as far as his resume is one of the best in the world, bar none. And again, he's a very, very cerebral guy, and he shared that with me, and I thought it was a very interesting take. And there could be some truth to it, because you could be a great motorcycle rider, okay, really, really great motorcycle rider, okay. You could be able to do anything at all on a Kawasaki 1000 or 1200, or I don't even know what the fastest Kawasaki's are today, okay. Wheelies and everything, which when I was young back in the day, I could do. All right, today I wouldn't even try it, and then you can try, to take a sharp corner on a Harley at 70 miles an hour, which is something you're not used to doing, and you're going to go down. You know what I mean? Because it's just two completely different animals. You're still a great rider, but that's just not your game. So I think there's something to be said for that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is why you always say nobody does it better, because that type of insight doesn't show up in the PPs. And I feel like we're all so focused on trying to find that edge through the PPs, especially on these big days, big weekends, the Triple Crown races, Breeders' Cup. Like, what can I see on this sheet of paper that nobody else is seeing? But, in reality, it's maybe that edge is coming from a couple of conversations and listening to the Pick Six King to find that edge that that nobody else knows about.
It's interesting, because I do believe it's important to find an edge, okay? And I believe it's become much more difficult now with the abundance of information that's out there. I think a lot of it's bad. I think some of it's good, but it's all subject to interpretation. So you got to be able to interpret the information that you have at your disposal. And, I still say, the best tool in the game today, okay, I wouldn't have said this 10, 20 years ago, today is your own eyes and what you see, what you can absorb, what you can remember. And it's one of the reasons I'm one of the few people that don't fret at the computer assisted wagering or CAW players being in the pool. Okay, everybody hates them, everybody knocks them. My take is a little different on that. I think that without their money in the pool, the game would be in a lot more trouble, because I think the amount of money they contribute to the pools is bigger than anyone realizes or anyone admits. Okay, so I think they're out there, they're in there, and they're a significant part of the game. And personally, I don't know how the game could really survive in its current state without them. So let's say that factors into my position. The other thing is that I don't care how much of a genius a computer model can be. There are certain intangibles that come from experience and memory that you can't program into an algorithm, okay? That, what we just discussed, was an example. A fake bias where the first three races were won wire to wire because they were supposed to be, an algorithm is going to pick up they were wire to wire and there was a speed bias that day. You follow me? An algorithm's not going to realize that the first horse was 3 to 5, the second horse was one of 3 speeds, the other 2 got left, and the third one just, nobody went with, or whatever the case may be. Those are the kind of things that your eyes, your brain, your memory, that instinctive nature that as a horse player you will develop over time can tell you that they can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you can't. So I'll go against them and bet less money and try and beat them, and encourage them to bet as much as possible, and just try and snake them with one race. All you got to do is pick up on something one race that their algorithm is not going to pick up.
Yeah. It's like
Go
they
ahead.
talk about in like sports gambling, right? Like something's got to pass the eye test.
Right.
And with those, computer assisted wagering, it kind of eliminates the eye test. Now they're, sifting through a gazillion different data points and putting themselves in the most optimal position to win. And, I don't think they would be dumping so much money into the pools if they weren't successful over the long term.
100% they are.
So, I've got no real issue with that style of play. The optics of it are a little weird when all that late money comes in, and your horse that you think is like 8 to 1 drops down to 3 to 1 down the backstretch. That's a little annoying, but whether that money came in 30 minutes prior or as the gate flies open, the money's still in the pool. I guess it would kind of influence where you're going with your selections, but at the end of the day, I don't know what the proper solution is. But taking out that your ability to see what these horses are doing, how they're responding, watching replays, watching races unfold, going beyond the PPs, as they say, I think is an advantage that if you have the time and want to put in the time and the effort and do the work, there are countless opportunities on a daily basis to be rewarded for that.
No question about it. And people don't like to talk about this because it's it doesn't fit the optics of it. But there were 2 horses last week. One horse I bet in a European race at 2 to 1. Okay, and I stopped looking at the board. I just watched the race. The horse won, and the commentator made a comment like, well, did go off the favorite, but 4 to 1 was generous favorite. I looked, horse went up to 4 to 1 from 2 to 1 when I bet. I bet another horse that was here in the United States at Keeneland that went into gate at heading to the gate was 5 to 2, crossed the wire at 7 to 2. They do uptick on occasion. It doesn't happen often, and nobody mentions that when it does happen. You know what I mean? Because it just doesn't fit that agenda. But I don't like the late odds drops. I don't think anybody does. I think there are fixes for that, several fixes, closing, the betting for them the last second when they send all that money in, or just having, real-time odds that reflect the true odds the minute the money comes in, and everybody having an opportunity to bet the very last second without them sending in streams of bets would kind of level the playing field, somewhat. I mean, there are things that can and should be done to correct what I would call low-hanging fruit that gives the races a bad look and a bad optic, and we should definitely be aware of that. But the CAW players, they get big rebates because they bet big money. That's just business. You know what I mean? Are the tracks, compromising the smaller player to cater to the bigger players? Yeah, there's certainly an argument for that. It's tough to argue against it. But let me ask you this. Can you tell me one business that doesn't do that? Does every business not cater to their bigger bigger customers. You know what I mean?
I've started and built my own small businesses, and the people who are valued, loyal customers that are contributing greatly to my bottom line, they are thanked and rewarded with freebies, gift cards, all sorts of different things to show my appreciation and thanks, and keep them, you know,
It's every business in the
passing
world.
passing the
Okay.
dollars.
I don't care what bank you bank with. Okay. If you're a regular customer and you walk in, you wait online. If you're a private client or an elite client or a gold client or whatever they call it, you have a dedicated banker, you don't wait online. You don't pay fees. You don't get charged for wires. You don't this, you don't that. You could make a phone call, all right? If you've got, you know, 5 million with a broker at some brokerage house and the market's going volatile, or you've got 10 million and his phone's ringing off the hook, whose call's he taking? The guy with 10,000 or the guy with 5 million? Who's stocks? Who's he moving first?
Yeah.
Every business caters to their biggest customers. Racing is no difference. It's a business. Now, I resent it a little bit because I feel for the $2 better, because they're the bread and butter of the game. And do they get hurt by other people getting bigger rebates that can be spread out amongst them? Absolutely. Do I think it's a good business model? No, but it's realism. It is what it is. It is what it is.
I mean, that's the reality of it, right? Like, what kind of rebate is the guy, you know, pumping $200 through the windows on a weekend gonna get, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean, he's not going to get 10%, 12%, 13%, 8%, like, you know, some of these other people might be getting. You know what I mean? It is just, it's not going to happen. He's lucky if he gets a free program and a cup of coffee. You know what I mean?
right.
You know, and
Even that sometimes is hard to come by.
hard to come by, no doubt about it. So it's you know, it's the game we choose to play. What negates all of that, in my opinion, okay, racing has banked on forever. They're degenerates, they'll bet on anything, okay, and for the most part they've been right. Okay, whatever we put out, they're going to bet on. Whatever we make takeout, they're going to bet on. Whatever we do for the big customer, they're going to come, they're going to bet anyway. All right. And they're right. All you got to do to change all that is Breeders' Cup Friday. Nobody make a bet. Nobody make a bet until say, listen, we want every racetrack executive at the table by 11 o'clock so we can stop betting by 12. And here's our list of demands. They'll all be lined up to be there to talk to us. But that'll never happen because they're right. We will never show them who's in charge. Me personally, I don't have that problem. I'm a very selective bettor. I bet what I want, when the circumstances are favorable to me and I have an edge. I could sit there with a stack of money and not make a bet if I don't like the way things are. I learned that the easiest way to get destroyed by this sport is to be compulsive or overbet when I was in my teens, okay? You've got to be selective. You can't be the guy that bets on anything that they put out there, okay?
Yeah. My brother sent me some plays for like the golden hour pick 4 the other day, and I was like, you're either chasing something or you won a lot early.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, see, I don't do that. You know what I mean? And even if you win in the long term, if you're that kind of player, you know, you're not going to win. You know what I mean? You're going to wind up in the red significantly. So it's just you know, you put the mathematics against you. So
yeah, I mean, the game's tough enough as it is, right? I mean,
yeah,
who can really be successful playing 9, 10 races a day, 4 or 5 days a week? Like you're just asking to get crushed.
right. No, 100%. And you will. This year, I think the Breeders' Cup is fascinating from a wagering perspective. We talked about it on the last Unfiltered, Michael Wilson and I. You're going to have a lot of short-priced favorites to decide what to do with, more so than most years, I think. Some of them are going to be very, very short prices, so people are going to have to, to put themselves in a position to win, be forced to make decisions. And I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I think you should, have an opinion and back it, but they're going to be forced to do that this year, because otherwise they're going to be in positions where, they can't win. If you're alive to Flightline and 4 other horses, you're probably not in a very good financial position, unless you caught a bunch of bombs leading up to there. But we're going to have a lot of decisions like that to make. And the weather, although I'm not a fan of predicting the weather that far out, I think a lot can change. They're saying maybe 2.5 inches of rain on Saturday. That could happen on Friday. We could be lucky. That could happen on Sunday. I don't know. What's the latest? Are you bringing up the latest forecast?
Yeah, I'm going to look right now. We'll see. Let's see. Hold on. Internet's running slow.
Hold on, let me try something. Mine usually is what is it? November 5th, correct?
4th and 5th, yeah.
Hey Google, what's the weather report for Lexington, Kentucky on November 5th, 2022?
Sorry, I can only give weather forecasts for up to 10 days in advance.
No, Google says it only knows up to 10 days in advance.
Yeah, so it says here, Friday, showers, 50% chance, 60% chance of rain. Saturday, showers, 40% chance of rain. Doesn't say how much they're expecting, but 50% chance, I guess, over those 2 days.
Right. Well, to me, that nothing screams can go either way more than 50%. So I guess it could go either way. So we'll see. Let's hope we get some nice weather, especially you and I, because we'll be out there trucking in the mud, hunting people down in the morning and afternoon, seeing what we could find out and bring to everybody out there on Past the Wire TV. We'll have some great coverage. Jim and I will be out there. Michael Wilson will be out there. We'll be talking to people, trying to shake some trees, find some stuff out, get some good information, and have some fun doing it. So anything else for this one, or?
I think that's it. I'm diving into all the research myself. Started a few days ago. Seeing some opportunities already. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for more over the next week and a half, and hopefully make some money.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for tuning in. A lot more on Past the Wire, a lot more on Past the Wire TV. If you want to join our seminar, it's up on Past the Wire TV. I'll put a link in the comments of this video as well. I think it's going to be one of our best and most interesting seminars yet. And we're all looking forward to the Breeders' Cup and everything that goes with it. So ciao for now.
History remembers moments of extraordinary strength, skill, and determination. True greatness is forged by those who fulfill their destiny.
Tracking Trips with Pick 6 King Jon Stettin. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it better.
Nobody does it better.